Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink friendly.
Thank you for joining us
and enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 32 of Empowered Poly, where we will be discussing the new book from psychotherapist Jessica Fern and co-author and restorative justice facilitator David Cooley, Polywise, which is the follow-up to Polysecure. And welcome to our online community, folks. This is on YouTube, this is on Spotify and various platforms, so people will be watching and listening. So excited to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Be on your best behavior.
Yes.
Definitely not.
No way.
Definitely not.
We just specifically said they don't have to be on their best behavior. No. So I think you should stick
given permission.
So I guess let's do you want to jump right into it and start asking some questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, so I'll start off. So this is a twofold question. First part of it is, what was the inspiration for writing this book? And can you tell us what this experience of writing the book together was like for both of you?
Great. I'll start. It was my inspiration. And I've said this, I think I do say this right in the intro of the book, that initially I thought this was going to be my first book. The inspiration really came from my clients, my psychotherapy clients, and working with couples and people in multiple partner relationships and individuals who are doing non-monogamy and struggling, and really wanting to support them and myself in understanding, why was this so hard? Right. And really getting to the deeper levels of why is this so hard? Not just that, oh, you shouldn't do non-monogamy, therefore go back to monogamy, or, oh, you're just being jealous or insecure. Like, those weren't sufficient. And at that time, those were kind of the answers that people were getting. Right. So yeah, this was let's dig deeper, let's sort through this, and let's find solutions. So first it was just, my own personal work to do with clients. And then it became a talk that I was presenting at conferences. And then, it became a book, which is great. And as I started to write the book, I quickly realized that I wanted Dave involved. He has a full-on chapter in the book that's his work presented. So I wanted that included, but we've done projects before and realized, this needs to actually be from both of us. And a lot of our story and our challenges with, being monogamous together, being polyamorous are in the book. So it just felt like it elevated the book to bring Dave in, and it did, in my opinion. Yeah. And then the process of working together, maybe you can take that or start with that, Dave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's one of the ways that we connect really strongly is intellectually. And we've always really had a love of process, especially around all things relationship related. And we work well together creatively. And so it was a lot of fun, actually. It's a ton of work to write a book, obviously, but I think it's a process that we're able to do really well. And it's easy to just be excited about feedback as opposed to feeling sort of stifled or, frustrated or whatever. It's just easy to kind of keep the ego to the side and just collaborate. So it's really been a place where we really do well together.
Yeah, we have different strengths that are very complementary. Mm-hmm. So they fit together well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. In the book, Jessica, you mentioned, and I think you mentioned this in Polysecure too, that Buddhism has had an enormous influence on you. And can you share a little bit more about that? And maybe, David, if you want to weigh in on how your own belief system has impacted your work or your experiences in poly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll start with Jessica again.
Yeah, it's had a big influence on both of us. And I wouldn't identify as Buddhist now, whereas I did at a previous point. But it's something that I've studied. It's something that I've done retreats in and had teachers in, and for many years. And in terms of poly, I think how it's influenced, well, definitely the tenet of impermanence, right? Because those of us that are doing polyamory, it's like really relationship is a path to awakening and growth often, and it's often a painful boot camp as well in the realities of relationship and where we need to do our inner work and our shadows coming up. So that idea of impermanence has been really helpful. But I think more than anything, Buddhism has helped me in the practices of meditation and mindfulness, really being able to observe myself and observe things like my thoughts, like paradigms, like narratives, right? So in moments, even in relation, so just deconstructing monogamy itself, right? I think Buddhism really supported that. Not that Buddhism has much to say about it per se, but right, that what I learned from it was I was able to apply, as well as in relationships, of being able to have an observation and to see, okay, I'm having these thoughts and feelings right now, but that's not everything that's necessarily going on. Or my feelings and thoughts are real, but that's not the complete truth. And just to have that space between experience and observation has made a massive difference. I think that's allowed me to navigate non-monogamy.
I'm just going to ask Greg to pipe it up here because he put up his hand. Maybe he's got something to add or question to ask. So that's another way to do this. If you want to, you can. Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, actually, Jessica, to your point about Buddhism, not only the idea of impermanence, but also the idea of a detachment, right? Not being attached to any specific thing or any specific outcome, right? That was a pretty significant lesson for me in my poly journey, was recognizing the differences between, what successful relationships look like in monogamy versus what they look like in polyamory or non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, and that idea of detaching from any sort of escalated expectation of what it should be.
Yeah.
And so that was a very Buddhist principle for me as well in my studies and understanding of Buddhism. So yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
And David, I just want to take a moment and before you jump into your experiences with your beliefs and stuff, and share with you the impact that your chapter had on me was profound. It was absolutely profound. I actually read it twice. I stopped myself, I went back and I reread it again because it was absolutely profound. And one of the reasons it was so profound for me was because in my work with clients, one of the things that I bring to the table that I think I excel at is communication, effective communication. And the reason for that is because there's three tenets that I have. It's intention, audience, and environment. Those are the three pillars or the three tenets, right? And within the intention, there's this idea that if you're speaking to be right, then shut the fuck up. Nobody really cares if you're right. Nobody really cares if you're wrong. If you're speaking to connect, learn, understand, get curious, then go ahead. And so basically what you did was you pulled all of that out for me. And I was like, wow, okay. So there's this validation, number one. And then there's also number two, the symbiosis in that, because I feel like, I simplify things. That's just the way my brain works. I simplify things down to, I like little small short statements. And so that intention piece is one of those small short statements. So I just wanted to share with you that it had a profound impact on things. And I was able to, the whole restorative process, I was able to use actually a couple of times since I've read it. And it's been really wonderful and really profound. So thank you.
Oh, nice. Yeah, thanks for naming that. I actually wrote it twice, so I love that you read it twice.
Perfect.
No, actually, I probably wrote it like 50 times, but I'm really appreciate you sharing that with me. Yeah, I think it is. It's a powerful concept, and I'm excited to talk about my beliefs on Buddhism and how they connect to non-monogamy. So if there's a way to circle back at some point to that would be fun too. But I think I studied Eastern religions in undergrad, graduated with a degree in there. And for me, it was like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, that were really the philosophical foundations for the way that I was able to relate to life in a way that felt really in alignment with core values for me. And so it's been interesting to watch sort of my spiritual journey morph into more of a relational, social journey, more secular, I should say, in that sense. But recognizing that all of those philosophical principles have really laid the foundation for the kind of work that I do and the way that I do that work. And one of the things that I really love about sort of philosophies like Taoism or Buddhism is the way that they conceive of the self as not sort of this coherent, fixed structure, but more of something that's changeable and kind of more to the whim of conditions, and that we have kind of more agency to design or construct or sort of adapt to or with. So that flexibility of a concept of self has really served me in so many different ways. And I think in the poly journey, that's really been at front and center, is just needing to have a flexibility in terms of the way that I understand self as it's evolving in so many different ways, so relatively quickly, because of the kinds of changes relationally that can emerge.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Woo! I know so many people who struggle with the complexity of polyamory, and they don't have that clarity of self amidst all of that. You know, they attach so much to ideals or partners or structures or right. And so, yeah, very good points. I'm glad that you have that in your life. I think so many people could benefit from, you know, kind of exploring those ideas and adopting those approaches and ways of thinking. They really are ways of being in the world, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this book is a sort of offering a lot of different ways of thinking about how to be in relationship, and the different models are ways to kind of offer some secular kind of, you know, added dimensions of how do you think about self? What is that connected to? And how much agency do you have in constructing that self for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Love that. I
So
love that idea.
the two of you, speaking of sort of you know, complexities of relationships, have quite a history together, don't you?
We do.
Would you like to talk about that with us?
Do you want to do this one?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite a sordid affair. I mean, what did we figure out last time? I mean, we were talking to somebody else about it recently, and it was 21, 22 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was an innocent thing of 23 or 4. I can't remember exactly. And you know, Jessica's just a few years younger. We met at a residential massage school in Northern California, and there was an initial chemistry that was very tangible, very palpable. And we hit it off right away, and you know, had a really long, awesome walk around the campus of this beautiful school up in the Sierra Mountains, and just got to know each other, and we're just kind of blown away by each other's way of seeing the world, and just the amount of alignment and values and worldview. And so very quickly it kind of spawned an impromptu romance. And within that, I think within a matter of, I don't know, weeks, was it weeks? Did we even make months?
Maybe it was like a month and a half or something, you know, it wasn't very long.
It was pretty quick where I got cold feet, you know, and now that looking back, I'm realizing it was my lack of maturity. You know, I was not ready for a woman of this caliber. And so I'm glad that downshifted to friends, which was initial hard transition, but it was good. And so we ended up staying friends, and we stayed friends for years. You know, she ended up leaving the school and working in Colorado, and I stayed for a little bit longer. I shifted out of the massage program, went into cooking, and then sort of followed a weird trajectory that way and was moving around. You stayed mostly in Colorado, but we stayed in touch. And so every couple of, I don't know, maybe like bi-yearly, we would like see each other. Kind of every 6 months or so, we'd have a trip. I'd go to you, you'd come to me. And there would always be that kind of question mark, like, oh, should we try it? Should we go back to that? What's going on? And it would be like, oh, you're with somebody, that's not going to work this time, or I am, or I'm in this phase of my life and not now. But it was always that question mark. And it really wasn't until I was starting to approach my 30s, I was like, realizing I was holding up everyone that I was dating to this mental standard, which was Jessica. I was like, oh, they're not Jessica. Why am I choosing something less? And kind of had this revelation that I wanted to explore that in the context of a committed relationship with her. And so I had this big vision of us, and kind of had this frantic mid-morning call where I was like, hey, why don't we try us? And she was like, great, prove it. Show me you're serious. And I did. And so we were kind of in that process of courtshipping long distance. I was in Virginia. She was in Denver. I moved to be with her. And then within 8 or 9 months, we were getting married. And then I'll turn it over to you for the rest of that.
Great. Yeah. And then, we had dialogues about the structure of our relationship. I was in a serious relationship with a woman before I was with Dave. And so even just being like, I don't know if monogamy makes sense, right? Do I just cut out one sex and gender for the rest of my life? And, but we did sort of go into exclusivity, and we did that for years, and we had a son, which we still have. And then we opened up, and, really stepped into being out as well as polyamorous, because I had been non-monogamous before, but really hadn't realized the construct of it and it itself as something to come out about or even take on as an identity. Yeah. And then a few years into that, we got divorced and we lived apart for a year. And then we moved back in together, and it's been several years now that we still live together. People keep helping us with our phrasing of we're nesting co-parents, we're life partners, we're co-authors. We manage this, a few acres that we live on together, and really have, it's a beautiful life now. And it's a very intimate, in-depth relationship, but we don't have a sexual romantic relationship anymore. So we've really been relationally fluid for 21 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And our family has been amazing. And just to give our family a shout out, my parents, his parents, we're all just still family. Even when we got the official divorce and we didn't know what was necessarily going to happen, and that we'd be back in this place that feels even better than what we were in. No one was needed to separate, and there wasn't that kind of conflict. So, yeah.
Yeah. Jessica's mom actually lives on the property with us now. Right. And she's
not in our house, but yeah.
Not in the house, but on the property in her own structure. And she's actually with our son right now. And we were joking about it. It's like, we're closer now than we were when Jessica and I were married. I was like, yeah, I've just been waiting all these years to get Jessica out of the way for me and you to get together.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting that you guys are sharing your story, because as you're sharing your story, I actually had goosebumps. It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's beautiful that you can identify those things along the way and then morph them into something that suits both of you in a way that feels authentic to each of you. And I think that's incredible. Absolutely fucking incredible.
Yeah, that was our commitment. I mean, even when we got married, there was sort of this just commitment to what truly is, and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So when we did separate and split romantically,
not throw the baby out. Yeah.
Right. Not exactly. We haven't thrown him out.
Oh shit! Sorry.
And we still have the bathwater.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that story. Jessica, you clearly respect the work of the Gottman Institute, because you talk about the Four Horsemen in there. What's been your experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know them personally, so I can't speak to having firsthand experience with them and the Institute. But I think as an institute, as a body of research, the Gottmans and their affiliates have really created something significant, 40 decades, 40 years, several decades of research on couples. And they have had queer couples, same-sex couples, interracial couples, intercultural couples. I don't think they've done much work with non-monogamous partnerships, but still there's a lot of wealth of information and wisdom and sort of what they have done. And what they can see about, I think that's applicable to all relationships, not just romantic ones. Right. So things like the 4 horsemen, I mean, to me, that's across the board and just human relating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Want to compromise a human relationship, start criticizing, start stonewalling, start
getting defensive.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think they do offer something that's great.
Awesome. David, do you have much experience with them as well?
Yeah, in the same way that I think it's just one of the foundational tools in terms of communication, because I'm focused on the realm of conflict specifically. For me, it's fundamental. And so being able to send partners who are really struggling with any of those communication pieces to that work and having that already built out the way it is, and just to have it so solid and so applicable so quickly, it just validates what I'm trying to do with them in terms of the shifts I'm trying to make in their communication dynamics. So for me, there's a ton of gratitude for just the hard work that they've put in, the clarity that they've really pulled out of that research, and just the applicability, the way that kind of a culture has grown up around it. I think a similar thing is with MVC, although I think MVC can sometimes get fraught in the way that it's used, where I think the Gottmans have kind of able to sort of avoid that in the same way. But I think it's one of those fundamental tools in conflict work that I'm just so grateful exists.
And just for the viewers and listeners, NVC is nonviolent communication by Michael Rosenberg. Marshall Rosenberg, right. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent of NVC as well. It's kind of what set me on this journey about intention, audience, and environment. And it's kind of where that was sort of the nuggets of information that I pulled out of that whole NVC thing, right? And it was same with Gottman Institute and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Very profound work, very impactful in the work that we do. It's also nice to see that there are professionals in the world, including us, who are using other people's work to help within their own work, because we don't know everything, right? And to try to find a way to know everything is just, it's unreasonable and impossible. And I love the sharing. I love the sharing, being able to, because Jessica, frankly, I mean, Polysecure was at the top of my list of resources that I would give to clients to read. I'd be like, you have to read this book. You have to understand attachment theory. You have to read this book. And now I'm going to say, not only that, but guess what? Now you got another book to read, motherfucker. So you're going to have to read 2 now. So, because
and
both
read Dave's chapter twice.
That's right. That's right. Read Dave's chapter twice. So yeah, so I think it's really beautiful that these resources are shared resources. So it's wonderful. And that we're all drawing from them and interpreting them in our own way, and allowing our clients to do the same thing.
Yeah. And we can also take what works for us and discard the rest, and, really design our relationships. I love the house analogy in the book. That was really powerful for me. I'm a visual person, and so any kind of visual analogy really helps me. And I've been using one in my work that, now that I've read yours, I'm kind of like, I'm going to change it.
What was yours?
Mine was kind of like, when you meet someone, they show you their best rooms, right? They show you the living room. They show you the nice clean kitchen and the guest bathroom, and that's what you know.
The closets, right?
That's right. You don't know about the closets. You don't know about the plumbing. You haven't seen the basement. You don't know about storage.
No, you don't want to see the basement ever, really.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's mold down there, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that was sort of where my house analogy kind of came in and ended, was like, what do you know about the entire house, right? And really assessing, where are you in that relationship and connection? How much information do you have? And where have you been allowed to kind of enter into their world, right? So that was sort of the beginning and the end of it. But the analogy that you used was more about the addition piece. And so I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, and this comes from sort of a caution, right, of particularly monogamous couples who are opening up and they start dating people. And there can be this way of sort of expecting other people to just conform or yield to them. And this happens down the road too, when you just have a hierarchical couple, right? That might be not recently opening up, but they're expecting other people to sort of, yield to the hierarchy or to the couple. And so it's almost this version of monogamy that I'm saying. It's like the monogamous house, and we're just going to, polyamory is just an additional room that we're going to add on. So we're not changing our house at all, right? But we just have this benefit of an additional room, that's nice to have. And so in the book, I'm saying non-monogamy is not an addition onto your house that doesn't get to change or doesn't have to change. It's actually a complete renovation of the house, because it's a different paradigm of relating altogether. Or sometimes it's a demolition of the house you've been living in, and there has to be a completely new rebuilding of the structure that includes space for all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what can get, if we continue with this analogy, right, what gets complicated is that, to me, every time there's a new partner that gets introduced into the system or the polycule, it's like there's a renovation every time, right? There should be.
Yeah.
That the new person does change the system and does add to the renovations, which it can be a lot to live in a house that's constantly being renovated.
Oh, it sure can.
Love
And
that.
also, that idea that, that every time a new partner is introduced into the polycule, the impacts of that,
Yeah.
It might be very subtle, or it might be quite obvious. It's kind of like when somebody moves in, like, did they bring a lot of things with them and put them up on the walls, or did they, just kind of take over their space and they don't really have a lot that they need in order to take up space and feel comfortable, right? And so, but being cognizant that that is occurring, I think, is part of everyone's learning process as they embark on their new relationships in poly. And also the focus that you give them, that sort of like, oh, there's a new person, that new relationship energy focus, right? Can be sort of like putting your other partners in, other parts of the house and compartmentalizing seriously, and really can harm the relationships in terms of feeling connected, right? So, I mean, that's certainly something that we've struggled with. Hey, honey?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I've been non-monogamous, well, my whole life really, but I've had the language and the awareness around it for the last 17 years, and been able to do it consensually and ethically for the last 17 years. But previous to that, it was a series of infidelities and stuff. So, but yeah, for me, 100%, being able to understand and bring the awareness to what the impact of my relationship with Leanne has on other partners, and then vice versa, what my relationship with other partners has, what impact that has on our house, so to speak, right? And even further to that, one of the things that I say a lot to clients is that the thing about one of the fundamental differences between monogamy and non-monogamy is, monogamy is kind of like you build the house, you live in the house, you put the furniture in the same place, and you never move the furniture ever. There's no reason to move the furniture because you like the furniture where it is. With non-monogamy, what starts to happen then is that when somebody comes in, guess what? You got to move the furniture around. And what happens when we move the furniture? Well, when we move the furniture, the dust bunnies start to come up. So now you've got to tend to all of the stuff that's been built up underneath the furniture that you haven't moved, right? So it's a very similar analogy and process, right? And I think it's really important that people understand that it is a ripple effect. It's not, you're not in a bubble here and nothing's going to change here. Because the longer you try to hold on to that stasis, I think the longer you end up damaging the foundation of the house.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So David, is there anything you wanted to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think going back to that question of Buddhism, it's like, how do we as human beings relate to change? And it's sort of this fundamental question. It's like, okay, what does that mean? And what is our relationship to change on kind of an existential level? And so if we've never thought about that or been forced to think about that, relationally, non-monogamy is going to force you to think about that. You are going to have to start thinking about, or even if you've been in it for a long time, when big changes occur within whatever system you've created or are a part of, are you going to embrace that? Are you going to step into it in a way that feels proactive, creative, embracing, or get knocked down by it, or totally resist it? It's just kind of, and again, that's not somebody's fault for struggling. But I think being prepared and thinking about the ways that we relate to change in general, existentially, is huge and important.
One of the things that really had an impact on me, David, was the restorative relationship conversations bit. And I read, like I mentioned, I read that chapter actually twice, and I just fucking loved it. I just thought it was insanely well written. It was just amazing. Jessica, this isn't to say that everything else in the book isn't fantastic and wonderful. I'm not trying to be dismissive of your
Oh, no,
contribution.
you don't have to caveat. It's okay.
Yeah. But I was really profoundly impacted, as I mentioned earlier, about the restorative relationship conversations. So I'm hoping that maybe you can maybe kind of expand on that a little bit for those that haven't read the book, and entice them to read the book, and maybe read that chapter twice, 5 times, 10 times, read the whole damn thing a million times.
Yeah, and the reason why Jessica's not getting upset about that compliment is because she helped me write that chapter, so it's no big deal. This is a full-on collaboration every sense of the word, the book was. So yeah, no, it's, for me, the journey started in the realm of restorative justice, and so that's where I begin the chapter, is just kind of contextualizing why is this word restorative appearing in this context. And so as far as I knew when I started the model restorative relationship conversations, the restorative approach wasn't being applied to intimate relationships, so I was doing it on an institutional level. I was working with courts, I was working with cops, I was working with schools, nonprofits, right? It was something that was kind of in the world at large at this level that just felt big and systemic, but I wasn't seeing it applied to intimate and personal relationships, even family or friends. And so it really, in a conversation between Jessica and I, sort of brainstorming after I had already left that world of restorative justice, just from, kind of nonprofit burnout, I was really missing the work, but needing to do it in a different way. And so she was saying, I've got all these clients, like, this is such a chronic thing. There needs to be sort of this niche filled. There needs to be specific work done on repair for ruptures that have occurred that are still continuing to linger and be an obstacle for intimacy. And people just need skill building around communication, and so the restorative process really offers us a lot of tools. I think the restorative umbrella covers so many different domains. It's kind of like the CrossFit of conflict. It's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's just a way in which it cross-pollinates and creates a community of people who are really interested in handling conflict in a way that's restorative, reparative versus punitive. And so kind of segueing into that, recognizing that there was sort of this dearth of sort of approach at this level, at the intimate personal level, I was really curious, like, okay, what can I do with that then? And so it's been really exciting to see how people respond to that. And since we were talking at the level of paradigm, in the book, I was realizing that there was a parallel with conflict. And so the way that we think about conflict, the way that we sort of hold conflict and approach it sort of as our default for so many people, is adversarial, is punitive. We've internalized the narrative of the societies that we come from. And that's not all societies, but I'm speaking in general for people in the United States, where I think the criminal justice system has left a pretty intense psychic residue. And so I wanted to make that parallel. And I think is something that is really helpful for people when they hear, oh, there's another way to even approach conflict that's not inevitably sort of destructive or painful. And that's really where the chapter is grounded, is trying to start getting people to start thinking about how to approach it differently, and then giving some tools.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, like I said, I can't say it enough. It was profound. I loved it. So I appreciate your work. I appreciate Jessica. I appreciate your work. It was just amazing. So I'm just going to shut up because I'm just going to make an ass of myself right now.
Well, this, Greg, I actually want to ask you a question, because I'm curious, because you're having so much resonance with it. I'm curious to hear what you think, because one of the big things about the restorative narrative And what it offers in general is the importance of sidestepping concepts like forgiveness without acknowledgement. Like, the reason why I love restorative concepts so much is because it recognizes sort of the universal human need for acknowledgement when there's been harm in a relationship. And I think that's absolutely crucial. And so I'm curious, because you all named that you're all working with people around conflict. How do you relate to that? What's your relationship been to that concept of acknowledgement, and how, if you've been working outside of a restorative context, sort of what is your overarching framework then?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that hit me is that I actually haven't been working outside of a restorative framework. I just didn't have that language until I read that. And that was what I think really hit me, was because it's this idea that, like I said, if you're going into a conversation with somebody because you need to be right, then seriously, just shut the fuck up. It doesn't matter. Who cares? But if you're interested in being curious and understanding another person's perspective and being willing to own your shit when shit goes sideways, right? All of those things are the things that we do in the work that we do, because we think they're foundational to creating healthy connections, loving connections, right? So it wasn't necessarily, it was kind of like being in the world of infidelity and then being in the world of consensual non-monogamy. I was doing the same thing, but I didn't have the language. And the language that you brought to me was quite profound. The way you explained it, and I've been able to interpret it as I do in my own way and use it just even in a couple of conversations that Leanne and I've had that have been somewhat contentious over the last few days about certain things in our life. And so I find myself stepping into that. And when I think to myself, you know what, I'm going to say something here because I need to defend myself, I will literally stop that. I will literally stop that thought in its tracks and say, I don't need to defend myself here. That's not why I'm here. And so I'll step back into a space of curiosity with her and want to genuinely understand what she's trying to say and the impact that my actions, intentional or otherwise, have had on her. And to me, that's the restorative process. And I know, again, I'm not college educated. I barely graduated from high school, so I tend to dumb the fuck out of things. And that's just the way my brain works. So for me, dumbing all of that down into my head, what comes out is I want to be curious. I want to be curious to understand somebody else's perspective. And in order to be genuinely curious about it, I have to put my own shit away, at least momentarily, to be able to create that space for them to be able to express themselves in a way that's going to foster that connection. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's so cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't say that's dumbing it down at all. It's more like, finding the gem and condensing it down, not dumbing it down. Because like when I do IFS work, internal family systems, and it's all about connecting to self, and then to do that with partners, where instead of having this my defensive part is arguing with your hurt defensive part, it's how do we have a self-to-self conversation? The thing, my litmus test, this is what I say, if you're still in curiosity, then there's enough self here.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
If you
stay, like, that's your barometer litmus test. Can you stay in curiosity? And the minute you feel yourself out of curiosity and into certainty, into knowing, into rightness, then, you're in a different part. And that's okay, but we need to pause, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so many of us are so hell-bent on being right because, like you pointed out, David, it's cultural. It's the way we grow up in an adversarial culture where it's more important to be right than it is to be heard or understood or appreciated or, any of the other things that come along with fostering deep, meaningful connections.
Because the consequences of being wrong are so extreme.
Right. And that also plays not only in the cultural sense, but it also plays very much in the individual wounding sense, because that's where it comes from for me, right? My sense of being wrong means that I have major abandonment issues. I'm guessing you can guess my attachment theory, my attachment style with just getting to listen to me. But I have major abandonment issues. And so for many, many years, I was going through the world thinking that if I didn't get everything right, then I was going to be left. But what I've come to understand is I don't have to get everything right as long as I stay in a space of curiosity. In a space of curiosity, right and wrong aren't at play. And that's basically what you just said, Jessica. And I just took up 5 minutes to reiterate that. Thank you for listening. Come to my tech talk.
But it reminds me of a story. I mean, one of the things that I loved about what you were saying is that curiosity and the willingness to step into the space at all. Like, it takes so much courage. And I remember that the situation that really made me wake up to the fact that I didn't want to work at the nonprofit anymore and I wanted to do what I was doing in a different way was a situation in which a principal at a local elementary school came to us. Typically, most of our cases were referred by the police. And so clients were referred to us and they either did our program or they were referred back to the cops and faced criminal charges. So there was a certain leverage there, right? And although the process is often transformative and powerful with us, and it's a powerful and awesome alternative, there's still that leverage. And I remember being uncomfortable about that. And then lo and behold, this principal comes out of nowhere and he's like, I've studied restorative justice for a long time, and we just had this thing happen on our playground the other day. The cops were called. We're talking about 8 and 9-year-olds. And children they really hurt each other. And it's about 4 different families were involved. And this is a really small school. This is like an under 100 kids school. So for that level of rupture to be there in their environment was tremendously disruptive. And so from the principal's perspective, there has to be a way to work this out. And so he was asking if we would do it pro bono. And we were like, hell yeah, that sounds amazing. We had never done the work with children that young before. And so it's kind of what you were saying, like, how do we dumb it down? Like, how do we bring it to its basic human elements and create a situation where these kids are scared? Like, they're in the room thinking they're going to get punished or like get hurt. The parents are angry. Like, there's so much tension in that space. But once we started getting those kids talking, it was just like everyone was in tears. And like the other kids were just like asking these questions. It turned into this very spontaneous and organic dialogue between these kids who had previously thought they hated each other, reconciling. And I remember just being blown away. It's like, there is no one in this space that's being leveraged to be here. It's because everyone in this room recognizes the importance of the community and the community bond. Everyone's a true stakeholder in this environment. That's the space I want to be in. I want to work with people that want to be in this space. That's the magic.
Well, fucking Luya. I love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that, go ahead, Jessica.
I never heard this story.
Really?
No, it's not. Yeah,
Oh my God, we have a first on our podcast.
Boom.
Well, and
Like that.
I feel such a parallel because I was in grad school with international conflict resolution. I was doing work on genocide in Rwanda. And it was a very different route, but the takeaway was like, oh, I want to be with like in conflicts where everyone wants to be there to resolve it. And that's sort of what led me back to more intimate partnership work, because it's like people who are showing up want this to get better. And it's really hard to do conflict resolution with people that aren't stakeholders. Yeah. And yet they're there. So, yeah.
Awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love this. Leanne, did you want to ask a question?
I just
Or
want to,
follow up on any of that?
yeah, I just want to go back to the parts work that you mentioned, because that's a big part of this text as well. The love you exercise and the ease. I didn't expect it to work so quickly. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a, effort to get there for me. And I was like having conversations with my parts right away. I found a part within a part. I was like, oh, I'm so complicated.
It's infinite once you open that box. Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I found, that like a lot of people, my teenager self kind of identified heavily with my sexuality as a way of getting attention, right? And getting connected to people. And then within that teenager, there was a toddler who felt disconnected. So it was like, I'm having conversations with both of my parts at the same time, essentially. But I was able to discuss in different ways with both of them. And you were so bang on with the follow-up to that, which is now, how do you want that part to interact with you?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So you mean it like in general or the follow-up piece specifically?
Whatever you'd like. I know this wasn't on the list of things we were going to talk about, so it's
Oh,
kind of off.
great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the parts where it came in because it's a chapter on sort of troubleshooting, like uncertainty or people who are having resistance to non-monogamy. They're having trouble getting on board, right? And this is a very common thing that comes to me where there's one partner who really wants it and one partner who would never choose this on their own or has a lot of fear or resistance or judgment about it, right? And so initially it seems like this is impossible. Right? So in, honoring the person that might not want to do this, but also helping them sort through, well, why don't you want to do it? And what I came to is realizing, well, which parts of you do and don't want to do it? And that became a real, almost like a Rosetta Stone of helping people get their real true clarity of whether they wanted to do monogamy or non-monogamy, right? And I'm fine with whichever direction they want to go. But as I say, I think in the book is I want that clarity and decision to be from your authentic adult self, not from reactive or wounded or judgmental parts of you, right? So when we identify which parts of you are struggling with this, it has this tremendous impact on people. Yeah. And then so, there's the acronym and walking people through the steps. And yeah, an important part of parts work is like, yeah, we can do this inner connection with parts. We can love our parts. This is a big chunk of it. But then we do need to transform or re-educate or update these parts of, okay, there's this way you've been functioning that's been a strategy, a survival mechanism, and that all makes sense and we'll honor that. But now it does need to evolve. And what does that evolution of this part look like? Yeah.
That's so helpful. And that follow through, I think it is a lot of where people don't go with their parts work, at least in my experience with people who have been through an IFS kind of therapy session or something like that, right? So interesting. And then, I identify as ambiamorous. So I have, a very well-developed monogamous side and a very well-developed polyamorous side. And so how do you kind of speak about ambiamory with people or how do you see it? Is it similar in the way that you describe the parts work or is it different? Maybe you can.
That's a great question. I think I would see it in maybe two different ways initially. One is that, yeah, you could just be more balanced in your parts that feel more monogamous, feel more polyamorous. And hopefully they're not in conflict with each other, right? That you're able to sort of give them the space, the acknowledgement that they need. But I think initially I would see it as a spectrum, and that people tend to be more on the monogamous side or the polyamorous side. And then there's a bunch of people that are in that middle that could go in either direction, depending on the relationship that they're in, the phase of life that they're in, what's going on in their life, right? That it's not a distinct orientation for one or the other, but they can move back and forth. And that's great.
Yeah, that idea of also, you said there was some people that have been deeply affected by just having permission to be monogamous.
Yeah.
From you. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It seems ironic, but often people, within certain communities, certain subcultures, certain cities and towns, right, that this idea that polyamory is more evolved, and then people feel ashamed for wanting exclusivity. And really it can be therapeutic to say you absolutely have permission to choose monogamy or exclusivity if that's what feels right for you. There's absolutely nothing less evolved about that at all.
Oh,
which goes right back to sort of designing your relationships, right?
Yeah, well, right. And I think what I would want for people is that it's their conscious decision. It's that they've thought through it versus the defaults to just what is expected. Right. So are you doing monogamy because that's just what you're supposed to do and you don't think there's any other way? or you really have put thought into it. You've even experimented potentially, and you realize, oh, this is what's best for me. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not having the feelings, having the thoughts, having the urges and even the resistance is perfectly fine and perfectly okay. But like you said, do you make those decisions from a state of reactivity, or do you make those decisions from a state of conscious awareness? And those
Yeah.
are two very different places, right? And I think
Definitely.
oftentimes what we see is that a lot of people are making those decisions from a reactive space, and that's when it gets difficult, and when it becomes very challenging for everyone involved, because then that's when the resentments come up, and that's when the feelings of obligation, the feelings of being trapped, and all of that stuff come into play. So,
Yeah.
David, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I got a question for you, Leanne, because in the book there's, and I think this is in this is in Polysecure as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jess, if it wasn't. But that spectrum between, ethical non-monogamy as lifestyle versus orientation. And so I'm super curious to know, as you're identifying as ambiamorous, where does that fit in? How do you relate to that? Like, do you feel that as an orientation or a lifestyle? Like, it may not even be relevant to your experience, but I'm curious if that particular spectrum or paradigm feels helpful in some ways. Yeah, I'm just curious kind of how you would relate to that.
Actually, it's funny you should mention that, because we just did a podcast, Greg and I, about ambiamory, in which I said it's a spectrum. And so I have come to a place in my life where I have consciously embraced polyamory as part of my identity now. I can look back over my history and see, like Greg, previous infidelities and things like that, where I was searching for more connections, other connections, different connections, and needing that in my world, but living a monogamous life in some ways. So I started out with a polyamorous marriage, and then I had two very traditional marriages that bookended a very, very E&M or CNM period of time. Yeah.
One of the critiques that I've heard from people who identify as ambiamorous is that they're often lumped into, just sort of by default, the category or the side of the spectrum that's non-monogamous as lifestyle. And there's sort of like a dismissal of their experience, in a sense that, well, you can take it or leave it, and there's not that room for the connection to, this has more to do with my identity, and my identity is a more wiggly thing, and I don't want you to take that away from me. So I was curious to hear how that potentially played out for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And it is very fluid for me, and has been based on where I am in life, like you were saying earlier, Jessica, who my partners were, what I was needing at that time. Yeah.
And I love the fact that she's ambiamorous, because it feels more authentic than trying to fit into one or the other of the boxes. Right?
Yeah, there's always a little bit of me hanging out the box, like I don't
like
quite fit.
Your leg.
Yeah.
So I love that that's her authentic self. I struggled with it, of course, because I identify as polyamorous, and I can't do monogamy. I'm not built for it. And so in a lot of ways, I went along feeling like I kind of dragged her into this, because if the preference was she would be monogamous, there's that default thinking, right? There's that reactive thinking coming into play, saying that if she was given a choice, she would be monogamous. She pointed out to me last night that I'm not that powerful of a motherfucker that I can tell her what to do and make choices for her, right?
I did.
So this is an active choice for her, and I have to respect that.
I said, I'm an autonomous, sovereign being making decisions for myself. Thank you very much.
That's right.
Was that explicit at the beginning of your relationship? Like when did you come to that identity?
For me?
No, for you, Leanne. Yeah, like I'm curious, like, when did you start to both have to navigate that?
Yeah, it was much later. And when we opened up, I was actually, we had closed our relationship for a time, opened up again, and I was monogamous at that time, and I really struggled. I went through all the primal panic, Jessica, that you describe, and and literally, you know, caved in many ways to my monogamous ideals and let them take over and spin all the stories. So that was rough, right? But, you know, consistently, Greg showed up and honored agreements and had honest dialogue with me and continued to be himself and allowed me to be myself. I think that's the key, right? Is that authenticity that we've been talking about, you know, and that creates a safe space where I can then explore and get curious about what is my identity here. And yeah, so I think I would say that was relatively recent, like in the last 4 years of our relationship, that I've come to that identity. And I think when I came to Greg and I said, I think I'm actually both, you know, he was like, huzzah, you know, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a beautiful thing to witness that blossoming. It was beautiful.
And you're describing healthy differentiation.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is a key
Yes.
part of your book.
Yeah, and it's not
Yes.
it's not written down on the questions, but can you talk a bit about that, Jessica, since you brought it up?
Yeah, we have a chapter on codependency, which
Mhm.
I think it's the biggest chapter, right? And looking at you know, us defining codependency, us not necessarily pathologizing codependency, that seeing it often, you know, is sprouted out of the romantic ideal, the mono-romantic ideal. Codependent ways are very encouraged culturally. And so then we find ourselves in this situation where we have a partial self, you know, a merged identity. We're enmeshed in our relationships. We don't know our own feelings and needs. We're deferring externally. And that's not necessarily a choice we've made. It's just how things became structured and wired, right? And it's really common, you know, in all relationships, to have some kind of enmeshment and codependency. But, you know, we're looking at how necessary it is in non-monogamous relationships to explore your codependent enmeshed ways and behaviors. And really, it's hard to do non-monogamy if there isn't healthy differentiation, basically. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that a
Another
good
great
summary?
chapter. You know, the whole fucking book is fantastic. Just buy it, people.
You know,
Seriously.
one of the
Buy
things that
10
I love
copies and
about the
give them to your
book,
friends.
one of the things I love about your book is the number of sort of key exercises and things to do. We've both benefited already just by putting some of that into practice in the last couple of weeks of our lives. And even just last night, like this book was part of our conflict resolution. It was a beautiful thing.
Nice.
We use the word beautiful a lot. But I mean, truly, I can't say enough about it. And I really want to encourage our listeners to get it and to use it. And, you know, one of the great things about your work, I think, is there is permission within it. It's not prescriptive. It's, you know, inviting us to go on this journey and to examine our parts and who we are in this world. And that if we don't do that work, you know, it can feel very prescriptive. It can feel like there's only one way to do it and I'm not doing it right. And so is it for me? You know, this opens up all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking to someone else the other day and they were saying, you know, kind of one of the results after Polysecure was like, it's all about attachment now. Right? And this book is saying, yes, that's important. And there's these other things as well, right? That it's not, when you're having struggles and issues, it's not always all about attachment. There's other things going on to be digging into. Yeah, so
And
hopefully.
one of the great things about Polysecure too is that in the book you talked about how it's not necessary to attach to an attachment style.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they change. Yeah, they change.
Yeah.
We're attachment.
Yeah, they change not only over time, but they also change depending upon the relationship.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're in polyamorous relationships, they change more frequently.
100%.
Simultaneously having different ones depending on the other relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even circumstances that pop up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or the way that metamor relationships can be really triggering of our attachment system or healing of our attachment system.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had one more question for you. Do you guys have time?
Yeah, we're
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
So Leanne, I think this was your question actually, because this is one of the things that you kind of came up with
Well,
a while ago, and she touches on it here too. So
it ties in with, I think, the monogamous mindset or opening up a monogamous relationship, or even coming from the monogamous programming that we all endure and and have coming at us, right? The element of grief, and grief being something that cuts both ways. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We're going to meta talk about it first because we saw your question that was like grief cuts both ways. And I was like, I didn't write that. You must have wrote that. And he was like, I didn't write that. Because we were thinking it was like almost a quote in the book.
Oh, maybe
right?
I wrote that.
Right. So then we were like, we did a search of the book. We were like, grief cuts. No, there's really.
And we were both convinced that the other one is like, that's you. That's so you.
And I was
that's
like,
you.
that is something you would write. I would never write that. So, right. What do you mean by grief cuts both ways?
Well, I think in the book, what the information that I remember, and I might remember it incorrectly because I do have memory issues, is that, when you're opening up a relationship, you grieve the monogamous piece often if you have an attachment to it. And then on the flip side of that, do you know what I'm talking about?
I
You
think
nodded.
now
Okay.
I know
Okay.
about this.
Do you want to pick it up?
So, right, there's more dialogue or awareness, right? That yes, we can transition and people would grieve the loss or the change of monogamy. But there can be a lot of grief in polyamory too, of the things you can't have in certain relationships. Is that what you were getting at? Yeah.
yes, I think I remember you bringing that up, and that's exactly what I think the book said is that even in polyamory there are things that you can't have that you give up, like exclusivity and the stability of exclusivity and the perceived foundations that it provides and stuff.
Yeah.
Or even things like, go ahead.
Yeah, like we might not nest with someone or have children, I mean, you fall in love with someone and then it's like that desire can, even if you don't want another child, right? The initial new relationship energy, it can be so powerful. And then grieving, oh, this isn't what's in store for us. Yeah. So there's many different ways, right? That polyamory can be so expansive. And then it also has restrictions on relationships and grief around what it's restricting.
Yeah. I have a client going through that right now. He's had his child. He doesn't want more. New partner, deeply in love, lots of new relationship energy going on, and she wants children. And so he's struggling with grieving that he won't be able to have that with her, at the same time knowing that it's not for him and that he doesn't really want it. And she's struggling with, I can't have children with you, and therefore I need to seek out other partners and look for that in my world, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now I wish we had the title of that section, Grief Cuts Both Ways.
Well, that'll be my blog post about your book. Okay,
Right.
well, I think we should probably wrap it up here. What do you think, honey?
Yeah, sure. I thought you were asking our guests. Yeah, I don't want to wrap it up, to be honest. I could talk to you guys for all fucking day. So, but we all got other things to do, weirdly. Yeah, life, stupid.
Would you like to share where people can get the book, or do you want people to get in touch, or how do you want to kind of wrap this up with some information for listeners?
Yeah, go ahead,
Jessica.
Okay, great. Yeah, people can get the book everywhere that you can get books. But ideally, if you have local bookstores, support your local bookstore. And there's, different websites that are in support too of online, you can get that. Or you can go to our publisher, Thorn Apple Press, and people can find me at jessicafern.com.
You can find me at www.restorativerelationship.com.
Nice.
Did you go in old school with the www?
I know, I had to do it. This is like, I'm from the old school. Like, I gotta show my age a little bit.
I kind of missed that, actually. Yeah, HTTPS :/back front fuck. I don't know, slash.
No one would have known to have done that if I hadn't said that. Like,
That's
right.
Couldn't have found you otherwise.
That's right.
That's right. You did. No, David is not to be found.
Look at this older people jokes.
Sorry, we're parents. We can do that.
Yeah, you're allowed.
That's right.
We're all above 40.
Yeah. How old is your son? Is that right?
Son. Yeah, he'll be 9.
8.
Oh, he'll be 9. Wow.
He'll be 9. He is 8. Okay, got it.
He is, yeah.
Nice.
I stay in the moment. She's living for the future.
Yeah, right. Mom world, dad world, right?
Totally. I'm already planning his birthday.
What's going to happen next? Dad's over here going, oh, look what he's doing. It's so cool.
I'm just like, when does this end?
Never, David. Never.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess to wrap it up, I want to say it's been such a pleasure to David meet you for the first time, and Jessica to reconnect with you. The book is absolutely fantastic for anyone, really anyone, but if specifically for those that are considering poly, any sort of non-monogamous relationship structure, just curious about it. You've been in it for years. I mean, I've been doing it for 17 years, and I'm still learning stuff, and it's fascinating to me. It's also a great reminder. It's a wonderful way to remind yourself of certain things that we forget, because we often get caught up in the minutia of life and we forget things. So it's wonderful. The co-authoring bit was amazing. David, your contributions to the book were just incredible. So yeah, I cannot speak highly enough of this. Like, it's going to get gross here in about 5 seconds if I continue. It's going to get like really fanboy levels of disgusting here in a moment.
Throw a tarp down.
Yeah. Throw a tarp down. That's right. Bring some towels. We're good.
No, thank you both for having us. It's super fun. Like, you all really created an awesome space to just dive in and really feel like an authentic dialogue, and just really loving that and appreciative of the work that y'all are doing. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it does. And remember,
choose love
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and at leannemillion.com,
or follow us on Instagram at @thegregmillion
and at leannemillion. Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm just overwhelmed with emotions right now. It's just incredible to have this community and have these resources, and it's just amazing. So yeah,
thank you so much.
Invaluable.
Yeah. Thank you for supporting it. It really means a lot.
Absolutely. And I will continue to support it. I will continue to shout it from the rooftops that this is in my opinion, it's the definitive resource for poly right now. And I think it's just incredible. So I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
And thank you, Greg, for keeping a safe space for F-bombs.
Yeah. You didn't say it though, did you?
I don't know if I did. I actually, did I?
I think you did. I think you went in.
I hope I didn't fucking miss my chance. That would be fucked up.
That would be fucked up, yeah.
www.
Fucked up.
Fucking Cooley.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other website.
That's the other website. Yeah, we don't talk about that one in public.